In this lesson, we will read and analyze A Bad Day for Sales by Fritz Leiber, which was published in 1953. And you can find this resource to follow along with in the video description link below. So we have Fritz Leiber was one of the most versatile and celebrated science fiction fantasy writers of the 20th century, born in Chicago to a family of stage actors. His parents were famous Shakespearean actors. He grew up surrounded by theater, literature, and performance. Went to the University of Chicago, performed on stage himself before turning to writing. Started publishing in 1930s, became known for work that crossed genre lines with ease. Wrote sword and sorcery, fantasy, horror, and science fiction. What set his writing apart is his ability to observe the anxieties of modern society. So he had advertising, consumerism, and Cold War, urban alienation. This would be how city life and technology can isolate people. Many of the things we see in our present day, except with now, it's not technically the Cold War, but we do have issues with Russia. So this will tell you some historical context on the Cold War. It was a decades-long political and military standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union, present-day Russia. Well, a lot of the countries, Soviet Union is part of Ukraine. Both countries possess nuclear weapons, bombs powerful enough to flatten entire cities, because this was right after World War II, when America did drop the bomb twice. So in American schools, children practiced duck and cover drills. They were told to crawl under desks and cover their heads if they saw a bright flash. That probably wouldn't have done anything, obviously. And he wrote this story. The Soviets had successfully tested a hydrogen bomb, a weapon far more powerful than anything dropped on Japan. The threat felt imminent, immediate, real, imminent. This is a whole world the story quietly sits inside. A world where Times Square could disappear in an instant and everyone knew it. So this was definitely had some Cold War undertones in this story. I also see this consumerism. When World War II ended, the factories were open for things besides weapons. So we had refrigerators, cars, televisions, advertisements flooded the new medium of TV. Shopping became a national pastime. Leiber was deeply skeptical of this culture, meaning he didn't like it. And then we had this will be definitely relevant, the invention of the vending machines. But at this point in 1953, vending machines were still a novelty. So they were something you'd be excited if you came upon, not just like an everyday thing nowadays. So with this, our protagonist, a robot that can move on its own, detect customers using radar, and approach people with personalized sales pitches, was pure science fiction. Nowadays, we do have these types of robots. We actually have the Serve Robotics robots, which are rolling for like Uber Eats, and they have people's food inside. So, and obviously we have self-driving cars, self-driving trucks. We are somewhat almost to this, we could say. And then we'll see some electronic news headlines about a hot truce. So tensions over Pakistan between the U.S. and Russia. A hot truce is a ceasefire that could collapse at any moment. And in Leiber's story, a legless veteran of the Persian War. This is a fictional future war set up in what we would call Iran, historically known as Persia. So this is kind of interesting, especially in our current Iran conflict. So this would have been a fictional situation when we come across the legless veteran, because obviously he's setting the story in the future. Then we'll be looking for irony, so when the unexpected happens. And that kind of goes along with the satire, in which humor and exaggeration can be used to criticize society, or when things are really absurd in a concerning backdrop. And then the tone, the author's attitude. So we'll have calm, matter of fact. I don't want to give some of it away, but we'll definitely have that to look for. And then we'll be looking for themes, obviously, technology, what should it be used for, consumerism, how much should that be affected by technology, even though we can already see it is. All right, now we'll begin our story here. And on the side, you'll see some points. So, the big right doors of the office building parted with a pneumatic whoosh, and Roby glided into Times Square. The crowd that had been watching the 50-foot-tall girl on the clothing billboard get dressed, or reading the latest news about the hot truce scrawl itself in a yard script, hurried to look. Roby was still a novelty. Roby was fun. For a little while yet he could steal the show, but the attention did not make Roby proud. He had no more emotions than the pink plastic giantess, who dressed and undressed endlessly, whether there was a crowd or the street was empty, and who never once blinked her blue mechanical eyes. But she merely drew business while Roby went out after it. For Roby was a logical conclusion of the development of vending machines. All the earlier ones had stood in one place on a floor hanging on a wall and blankly delivered merchandise in return for coins, whereas Roby searched for customers. He was a demonstration model of a line of sales robots to be manufactured by Schuler vending machines, provided the public invested enough in stocks to give the company capital to go into mass production. This is basically very much like the robots we have now. The publicity Roby drew stimulated investments handsomely. It was amusing to see the TV and newspaper coverage of Roby selling, but not a fraction as much as being approached personally by him. Those who were usually bought anywhere from 1 to 500 shares if they had any money and foresight to see that the sales robots would eventually be on every street and highway in the country. Roby radared the crowd, found that it surrounded him solidly, and stopped. With a carefully built-in sensing of timing, he waited for the tension and expectation to mount before he began talking. "Say, Ma, he doesn't look like a robot at all," a child said. "He looks like a turtle." Which was not completely inaccurate. The lower part of Roby's body was a metal hemisphere hemmed with sponge rubber and not quite touching the sidewalk. The upper was a metal box with black holes in it. The box could swivel and duck. A chromium bright hoop skirt with a turret on top. Reminds me too much of the little Joe Paratanks, a legless veteran of the Persian War, muttered, and rapidly rolled himself away on wheels, rather like Roby's. So here we have the technology. He might have been injured by one of these paratanks. So he sees the technology as a weapon. But he is also using technology, like Roby's, for a medical device. So you could say different uses of technology in this scene. His departure made it easier for him, of those who knew about Roby, to open a path in the crowd. Roby headed straight for the gap. The crowd whooped. Roby glided very slowly down the path, deftly jogging aside whenever he got too close to ankles and skyline or sockasins. The rubber buffer on his hoop skirt was merely an added safeguard. The boy who had called Roby a turtle jumped in the middle of the path and stood his ground, grinning foxily. Roby stopped 2 feet short of him. The turret ducked. The crowd got quiet. "Hello, youngster," Roby said in a voice so smooth as a TV star, and was in fact a recording of one. The boy stopped smiling. "Hello," he whispered. "How old are you?" 9. "No, 8. "That's nice," Roby observed. A metal arm shot down from his neck, stopped just short of the boy. The boy jerked back. "For you," Roby said. The boy gingerly took the red polylap from the neatly fashioned blunt metal claws and began to unwrap it. "Nothing to say?" asked Roby. Thank you." After a suitable pause, Roby continued, "And how about a nice refreshing drink of Poppy Pop to go with your polylap?" The boy lifted his eyes, but didn't stop licking the candy. Roby waggled his claws slightly. "Just give me a quarter, and within 5 seconds. A little girl wriggled out of the forest of legs. "Give me a polylop too, Roby," she demanded. "Rita, come back here," a woman in the third rank of the crowd called angrily. Roby scanned the newcomer gravely. His reference silhouettes were not good enough to let him distinguish the sex of children, so he merely repeated, "Hello, youngster." "Rita, give me a polylop." Disregarding both remarks, for a good salesman is single-minded and does not waste bait, Roby said winningly, "I bet you'll read Junior Space Killers. Now I have here. Uh-oh, I'm a girl. He got a polylop." At the word girl, Roby broke off. Rather ponderously, he said, "I'll bet you read G.G. Jones' Space Tripper. Now I have here the latest issue, that of that thrilling comic. Not in yet the stationary vending machine. Just give me 50 cents, and within 5. Please let me through. I'm her mother." A young woman in the front rank drawled her over her powder-sprayed shoulder. "I'll get her for you," and slid out 6-inch platform shoes. "Run away, children," she said nonchalantly. Lifting her arms behind her head, she pirouetted slowly before Roby to show how much she did for her bolero half-jacket and her form-fitting slacks that melted into skyline just above the knees. The little girl glared at her. She ended the pirouette in profile. At this age level, Roby's reference silhouettes permitted him to distinguish sex, though with occasional amusing and embarrassing miscalls. He whistled admiringly. The crowd cheered. Okay, this seems weird. This is what Roby is kind of supposed to look like. This is from the original magazine, and then this is a lady that comes in front of him to do this like pirouette, kind of like dance thing, to distract the crowd so that the lady can find her daughter, who he definitely had given her this inappropriate story, well, comic, tried to sell her a space traverse story, which would be like an adult content kind of comic. So we see here the problems of the technology, and we have those today. They have AI children's toys that are doing like saying inappropriate things to kids. That's definitely something that's happening. And you could also say the idea of fairness, like he gave one piece of candy to the one kid. It's not really that big of a deal if you're giving away, well, I guess if you're giving away free lollipops all day, but most of the time people would just give candy to children regardless, not choosing one or the other. So this idea of fairness and being able to tell the difference between children and adults, that's something we see the robot struggling with. All right. And someone remarked critically to a friend, it would go over better if he was built more like a real robot, like a man. The friend shook his head. This way it's subtler. No one in the crowd was watching the news script, overheard as it scribbled, ice pack for hot truce. Vanadin hints Rus may yield on Pakistan. This here would be a news line. Roby was saying, in the savage new glamour tint, we have Christian Mars blood, complete with spray applicator and fit all finger stalls that match each finger completely, except for the nail. Just give me $5. Uncrumpled bills may be fed into the revolving rollers you see beside my arm, and within 5 seconds... No, thank you, Roby, the young woman yawned. Remember, Roby persisted, for 3 more weeks, seductivizing Mars blood will be unattainable from any other robot or human vendor. No, thanks. Roby scanned the crowd resourcefully. Is there any gentleman here? He began, just as a woman elbowed her way through the front rank. I told you to come back, she snapped at the little girl, but I didn't get my polylop. Who would care to? Rita! Roby cheated! Ow! This here about the makeup, Mars Blood, is a parody of a 1950s cosmetic language, dramatic, over-the-top, and absurd. Seductivizing is a made-up word. Roby's pitch and Rita's mother's desperate calls play against each other. Nobody wins. So basically, it's just Roby getting in the way of people trying to sell makeup and things they don't need. Meanwhile, the young woman in the half-bolero had scanned the nearby gentleman on her own. Deciding that there was less than a 50% chance of any of them accepting the proposition Roby was about to make, she took advantage of the scuffle to slither gracefully back into the ranks. Once again, the path was clear before Roby. This one, struggling from the privilege of having their money taken away, Lieber's sharpest satirical line so far. He's describing shopping people as eagerly competing to give their money to the machine. The absurdity is precise, so they're all just waiting to be able to buy something from him. He paused, however, for a brief recapitulation of the more magical properties of Mars blood, including a telling phrase about the passionate claws of a Martian sunrise. But no one bought. It wasn't quite time. Soon enough silver coins would be clinking, bills going through the rollers faster than laundry, and 500 people struggling for the privilege of having their money taken away from them by America's first mobile sales robot. But there was still some tricks that Roby had to do for free, and one certainly should enjoy those before starting the more expensive fun. So Roby moved on until he reached the curb. The variation in level was instantly sensed by his underscanners. He stopped. His head began to swivel. The crowd watched in eager silence. This was Roby's best trick. Roby's head stopped swiveling. His scanners had found the traffic light. It was green. Roby edged forward, and then the light turned red. Roby stopped again, still in the curve. The crowd softly awed its delight. It was wonderful to be alive and watching Roby on such an exciting day, alive and amused in the fresh weather-controlled air between the lines of bright skyscrapers with their winking windows and under a sky so blue you could almost call it dark. This would be like telling us that the weather-controlled, they're basically kind of inside a city bubble, but way up where the crowd could not see. The sky was still darker still. Purple dark with stars showing, and in that purple dark, a silver-green something, the color of a bud, plunged down at better than 3 miles a second. The silver-green was a newly developed paint that foiled radar. Roby was saying, while we wait for the light, there's time for your youngsters to enjoy a nice refreshing poppy pop, or for you adults, only those over 5 feet tall are eligible to buy, to enjoy an exciting poppy pop fizz. Just give me a quarter, or, in the case of adults, $1.25. I'm licensed to dispense intoxicating liquors, and within 5 seconds. So basically he's saying, he serves anyone alcohol that's over 5 foot tall, which you could say is problematic. And now, this in parentheses, because no one can see it coming, there is a silver green newly developed paint that foiled radar. We can assume that this is a bomb. But that was not cutting it quite fine enough. Just 3 seconds later, the silver green bud bloomed above Manhattan in a globular orange flower. The skyscrapers grew brighter and brighter still. The brightness of the inside of the sun. The windows winked blossoming white fire flowers. The crowd around Roby bloomed too. Their clothes puffed into petals of flames. Their heads of hair were torches. The orange flower grew, stem and blossom. The blast came. The winking windows shattered tier by tier, became black holes. The walls bent, rock cracked, a stony dandruff flake from their cornices. The flaming flowers on the sidewalk were all leveled at once. Roby was shoved 10 feet. His metal hoop skirt dimpled, regained its shape. The blast ended. The orange flower, grown vast, vanished overhead on its huge magic beanstalk. It grew dark and still, very still. The cornice dandruff pattered down. A few small fragments rebounded from the metal hoop skirt. Roby had made small, uncertain movements of a feeling for broken bones. He was hunting for a traffic light, but it no longer shone either red or green. So this would be a quite upsetting scene, basically, of the nuclear bomb going off with the mushroom cloud. They call it a globular orange flower, though. And this would be figurative language. Their clothes puffed into metal flames. Their heads of hair were torches. These would be a metaphor, and I guess this is another metaphor. Also some personification way, because clothes don't puff into petal flames. But definitely describing all these people on fire. And Roby, he is decently okay. He slowly scanned a full circle. There was nothing anywhere to interest his reference silhouettes. Yet, whenever he tried to move, his underscanners warned him of low obstructions. It was very puzzling. The obstructions would be the people on the ground and debris. The silence was disturbed by moans and a crackling sound, as faint at first as the scampering of distant rats. A seared man, his charred clothes fuming where the blast had blown out the fire, rose from the curb. Roby scanned him. "Good day, sir," Roby said. "Would you care for a smoke? A truly cool smoke now I have here a yet unmarketed brand." But the consumer had run away. The customer had run away screaming, and Roby never ran after customers, though he could follow them at a medium brisk roll. That's definitely dark irony that he's on fire and Roby's offering him a cigarette. He worked his way along the curb where the man had sprawled, carefully keeping his distance from the low obstructions, some of which writhed now and then, forcing him to jog. Shortly he reached a fire hydrant. He scanned it. His electronic vision, though it still worked, had been somewhat blurred by the blast. "Hello, youngster," Roby said. Then, after a long pause, "Cat got your tongue? Well, I have a little present for you, a nice, lovely pollylop." "Take it, youngster," he said after another pause. "It's for you, don't be afraid." His attention was distracted by other customers who began to rise up oddly here and there, twisting forms that confused his reference silhouettes and would not stay to be scanned properly. One cried, "Water," but no quarter clinked in Roby's claws when he caught the word and suggested, "How about a nice, refreshing drink of Poppy Pop?" The rat crackling of the flames had become a jungle muttering. The blind windows began to wink fire again. So this would certainly be a scene with things on fire, debris everywhere, and people in absolute distress in need of medical assistance. A little girl marched, stepping neatly over arms and legs she did not look at. A white dress and the once taller bodies around her she had shielded her from the brilliance and the blast. Her eyes were fixed on Roby. In them was the same imperious confidence, though none of the delight with which she had watched him earlier. "Help me, Roby," she said. "I want my mother." "Hello, youngster," Roby said. "What would you like? Comics? Candy?" "Where is she, Roby? Take me to her." "Balloons? Would you like to watch me blow up a balloon?" The little girl began to cry. The sound triggered off another of Roby's novelty circuits, a service feature that had brought in a lot of favorable publicity. "Is something wrong?" he asked. "Are you in trouble? Are you lost?" "Yes, Roby, take me to my mother." "Stay right here," Roby said reassuringly, "and don't be frightened. I will call a policeman." He whistled shrilly twice. Back in the day, you could whistle and, police would come. Well, I guess in Times Square, maybe they might. Still. Time passed. Roby whistled again. The windows flared and roared. The little girl begged, "Take me away, Roby," and jumped onto a little step in his hoop skirt. "Give me a dime," Roby said. The little girl found one in her pocket and put it in his claws. "Your weight," Roby said, "is 54½ pounds. Have you seen my daughter? Have you seen her? A woman was crying somewhere. I left her watching the thing while I stepped inside. Rita." "Roby, help me." The little girl began babbling at her. "He knew I was lost. He even called the police, but they didn't come. He weighed me too, didn't he, Roby?" But Roby had gone off to peddle Puppy Pop to the members of a rescue squad who had just come around the corner, more rowboat-like in their asbestos suits than he in his metal skin. And that would be the end. You could say this is also ironic in the end, because asbestos is definitely not something people would be wearing as a suit nowadays. Like, it is poison. So in this story, the technology was used to sell stuff, and when they really needed help and the technology would have benefited them, they were not able to use that. So anyway, and then clearly it's definitely ironic. These people are all going to be pretty doomed if they're in anywhere near a nuclear blast. So it does have a good ending, but I wouldn't assume that these characters are going to be okay long term. But that would be our short story, A Bad Day for Sales. And here we can have some of our words, because some of these would have been words that aren't really like a giant billboard. We do have those even today. The Schuler, this would be the company that makes Roby, so specific to Roby. Then the fictional small military robots or tanks. So see, in this one, the Persian War was fought in Persia, the historical name for what is now Iran. The 1953 Cold War proxy conflict in Asia and Middle East were common. So maybe they're saying that something else would have ended up happening throughout the time, but this would have been fictional. And these types of tanks also would have been fictional. And this, sockasins, is a play on words between socks and moccasins and skyline. So some of these terms here, and if you ever read science fiction stories, you'll notice that there'll be words that you can't find the meaning to in a dictionary, because they would be made-up words by the author to give it this futuristic feel or contribute to the setting. Because we also have polylops, just a lollipop backwards. So these would be some of the terms you can look through. And in the next lesson, we'll use this TEO method to write a paragraph, and we'll use it for our short response answers. So we'll have some short responses in our next lesson. And you can find this in the video description as well, in case you forgot.